Okay, we're live. Good afternoon. Welcome to Shift Balance Talk Show. As every day at 6 p.m. Central European Time, we are live streaming a new episode with inspiring women around the world. So today, I'm going all the way to Tanzania to introduce a feminist, an activist, an advocate of women's rights with 30 years of experience in the field. She's called Laeticia Mukurasi. Welcome, Laeticia.
Thank you so much, Clarissa, and thank you for having me here.
I'm actually humbled and honored to have you in this platform. And I'm really excited to talk to you and to know about your work as an inspiring story also. Laeticia, basically you've been a feminist and a women advocate all your life. You work with many international organizations and especially the Development Bank, the African Development Bank, as a gender expert. And you have two main books. The one of 1991, One Woman's Struggle for Employment Rights in Tanzania, which is a book that is being quoted everywhere in the development field and the gender field. And last year you released a Triumph for Women's Rights, a African Story, 2019. I would like to ask you a little bit about your journey and your fight for women, because you have a long story.
Thank you, Clarissa. I do have a long story indeed. Let me first start by saying that after 10 years, I lived in a Tanzanian village in the place called Kagera region, which gave me a good perspective on life because it was very different from urban life. In my years in the village, this is what I saw women do. They got up from 5 up to 11 p.m. at night, doing all types of work, overburdened, carrying water, firewood, cooking, managing households, looking after the sick and the old, tendering to goats and chickens. And I began to build a perspective that there was inequality, although I couldn't have known that term at that time. But what I knew was that women were overburdened. And as you can see, I have captured the essence of that perspective, even on the cover of my book. You can see the woman with firewood, washing and fetching water, an entrepreneur, cooking, looking after kids, farming, being pregnant, and so on. And I began to form this sense that women were oppressed, overburdened, and marginalized. I saw a lot of gender-based violence. I saw a lot of young women dying in childbirth. Many women of my age did not attend school because of a cultural predisposition to favor male children over female children. I saw a number of women in my area go into prostitution because they could not cope with marital arrangements, and yet they had no recourse of going back to their households because that was culturally interdicted. I remember promising myself that what I saw would never happen to me, but not only that, I set out to study and understand how I can help to solve this problem. And finally, I decided to translate whatever what I saw when I was growing up into some kind of manuscripts, books, so that even the future generation could know that this is how it was then and this is how it is now. I grew up and educated myself. My first degree is in political science, but my second degree is gender and development, which I studied at the University of Sussex in the UK. The reason why I had to undertake, I have to have the tools of trade by which I could advocate, negotiate, and manage to convince societal changes. And I felt that I couldn't do that if I didn't have access to knowledge and skills on how to do those things. I also want, now that I'm grown up, I'm retired actually, my exit strategy is to hand over the baton to you, the younger generation, so that you can carry on the struggle. In short, that is how it is.
Wow. This is already an inspiring story. And I want to ask you, so the first book that you released in 1991 was really about gender equality in the work field. Basically, it was more into the equality in the job environment in the work field. And the second one, the one that you released last year, it's called A Triumph for Women's Rights, Her African Story. It's below here. Can you tell us about this book? Like, what is it about, and how did it come about also?
Do you want me to tell you on both books or on the second one?
We can I mean, you can mention the first, but we would like to know more about the one that you released last year.
As I grew up, I read a number of books, and I finally ended up by asking myself, why is it not possible for me to write a book? I didn't have a topic though that I felt confident enough to put my ideas across. And then something happened. I worked in an organization where I was the only woman manager in that company. In 1985, my government was implementing the structural adjustment program and policies and required my government to reduce the number of workers as a measure to cut costs. Believe it or not, among the 7 managers who were in that organization, I was the only subject of this cost-saving measures. I was the only one who was dismissed on cross-cutting grounds. And then I couldn't believe this, because many things might be said about my country, but there are strong pro-equality policies even at that time. So I decided to challenge this government directive, because I thought it couldn't apply to the only woman manager, and it had no legitimacy whatsoever. So you can imagine, I'm working in a government firm and I'm challenging a directive of the government. And that was not taken very favorably by many people. But I knew that the government had not actually issued that directive to retrench people of my caliber, but that the men in the organization felt uncomfortable by having me in the line of management. And I appeared as a weak link who could be gotten off easily. So I decided to take this quasi-government organization to court, and I won the case. And then I wanted to tell the women who were mostly afraid to contest some of the government regulations that it can be done, because essentially the government is just a body, but there are people who implement policies on behalf of the government who might have their own axe to grind and who might want to use the government directive camouflage their own ill intentions. In short, I won, and I wrote the book to inspire other women and men never to give up to injustice, that they must fight for what they think is right. Now, regarding the second one, this one is a tougher ball game. The first one concerns, there are two parts to this story. The first one concerns my struggle to get this powerful continental institution to be accountable for its policies on gender. And then there is a second part, having suffered a lot of insults and expletives from my colleague, I come into collision with one senior officer in the organization who calls me all types of names, including that I'm a troublemaker and a feminist who should not introduce these feminist ideas in an institution and just stick to the gender agenda. Obviously, I don't think this person knows the interconnectedness between feminist ideals and gender equality. So I also set out to challenge this, and in the process, I lose my job again, which I fight under an international tribunal, and I get paid and compensated, after which I leave the institution. But the more interesting part of the book is the challenges that I meet while trying to mainstream gender within an institution, a strategy that is hailed all over the world as a blueprint of women's liberation. I don't know whether you have time. Would you like to go through some of the challenges that I met?
Yeah, definitely.
The first is the rigid mindset consisting of patriarchal ideas about the place of women in development. You see, when I entered the bank, and a development bank at that, because this is the African Development Bank, I expected to have such an enlightened clientele who knew the links between gender and development, and that I would have no trouble propagating my ideas, but that was not the case. I think what I was forgetting was that men don't lose their patriarchal perspectives once they enter into a development institution. They carry the mental baggage which see women as marginal, as incompetent, notwithstanding the world acknowledgement of the centrality of women, especially in the African context. You see what I showed you? These are the rock. This is the hand which rocks the universe in Africa. She is the main provider. She's the breadwinner. But the challenges that I encountered were, for instance, the fact that many staff in the bank thought that they could bring about development by maintaining the status quo. When development projects were being introduced, they expected the gender division of labor to remain intact, with women working 14 to 16 hours on top of the project work which would be required of them. And I kept having to explain over and over again that, look, when we accepted gender mainstreaming as a strategy of development, what we were saying was that even the structural configuration, the division of labor, has got to change. And this is how you bring about gender equality. You do not maintain all things intact and expect that everything shall remain as it is, with women being overburdened. We have to canvass and advocate that women get a fair deal, that they not be used as instruments of patriarchy and remain hostage to neoliberal exploitation and capitalist exploitation.
Exactly.
This line of reasoning did not get me many friends or colleagues in the majority, because then I began to be accused of bringing feminist principles in the bank, as if it was a bad thing. I mean, once you accept to be guided by gender equality, you cannot but accept that feminist principle has to be part of the deal. The other thing, I was placed at a very junior level, despite my experience and academic qualifications. The almost close to 12 years that I remained in the bank, I was put under an environmentalist. And mind you, we are the age where we did not have the interdisciplinary approach which you people now enjoy. A person trained in environment is an environmentalist, full stop. He doesn't have all these side things about gender equality, about poverty, no. So you can imagine having to send the message to senior management through a person who does not know anything about gender and who might have even strong reservations about it. I felt I kept banging my head against the wall several times because things would not move. And yet I kept on introducing different approaches, bringing different advocacy points and so on. It was quite hard. So I want to capture this so that the generations which has now taken over would know what we, the pioneers of the gender mainstreaming strategy, had to contend with. And I'm hoping that things have changed, although I don't have any evidence that things have really significantly changed even up now.
Exactly. By the way, we are going to put the link of the book, which is something that anybody who works in the development field should read. It's mandatory. But what I wanted to ask is, like, as you said, gender mainstreaming, the gender agenda within projects, it's always been perceived as if women should get the crumbs falling from the table. But when we think about feminism, we think about a different mindset, a different approach, which is not against men, it's against patriarchy. So I was wondering, so this is my question for you. As you said, it's you haven't seen much progress along all these years, and I agree with that as well, because I have also had my experience and I cannot see this moving forward. What do you think are the real structural problems for this gender agenda to move forward?
You see, I don't know whether this is a structural problem as much as it is a culture. There has not been sufficient change in the culture, in the values, in the norms that underline development, at least in Africa. I can't speak for what is happening elsewhere. People are still steeped in a mindset. Sorry, I'm on the interview. Sorry, bye. People have not, I don't know, I need this. Let me put it here. Probably let me remove the voice. I think the problem is there has not been sufficient mindset change. People are still holding on their precious traditions, values, and norms. And let me say this, it is our fault. You see, some of us feminists think we can do it alone. We cannot. We have not made sufficient efforts to involve men in this struggle. Tell me, the coin always has two sides. How do you expect things to change when we are simply talking ourselves and not talking to the on the other side. There cannot be a change if men are not part of the equation of that change. That's a fallacy. There has to be a corresponding change in men. Then everything flows from there. Because then you have men, for instance, like in my country, supporting now the fact that girls of 14 and 15 cannot be married, even when they have the consent of the state and the consent of their parents. You have men supporting the fact that girls cannot be married while they are still in school. You have men accepting stringent fines and even imprisonment for women, for men who rape and torture girls. I think the problem is not only structural, but it begins with the mindset, which does not allow those structural changes to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those, for those who are working also in the development field, I think there is this discussion going on, because a lot of money is being poured into development and, meeting the environmental agenda, the gender agenda, but it's always a kind of perception based on based maybe on a pattern or on a structure that is something that maybe is not right, maybe should be challenged as well.
Yes, I have heard a lot of special consideration when it comes to gender that we don't want to tamper with. I think that's a lame excuse, because it is possible to put conditionalities that unless this is done, then the resources will not be forthcoming. It has happened in one country, which I shall not mention for reasons of propriety, that in that country, girls who had become pregnant were prevented from coming back to school in the formal system of schooling. And there was a lot of outcry, both nationally and internationally, about this particular interdiction. Now, the World Bank was about to dish out money for girls' education, and then they decided that unless this particular decree, because it was not even the law, decree was removed, no funds would be forthcoming to this government. Do you know what happened? The government backtracked and has now allowed girls who have got children, who fall pregnant, to come back to school. I think this is the dilemma even of the so-called development partners and donor communities, is that things are also not that good in their own countries, because as we know, there is no country which has achieved gender equality.
Absolutely.
And mind you, in many contexts, except for Finland now and probably Canada, you have cabinets that are patriarchal, because the proportions of women tend to be drowned out by the majority of the cabinet persons who are there. But because now they have also, some of these donors have their own fears, because they fear women in their own countries. They have not granted them full equality. So how can they go into another man's house and tell them to have full equality? So there is a state of unsureness about how to handle this conundrum called gender, because people have reservations because their households, their own houses are not clean as well.
Yeah. Yeah, especially their own houses.
Yes.
I want to read a piece of this poem that you wrote, which I really liked. There is a part that I would like to read. So this is called The Mainstreaming Conundrum, and it's been written, I think, when you participate in the Beijing negotiations. So at some point, it says, working in gender mainstreaming can be an occupational hazard. It has taught me to tread with care. I do not know how, when, and whose sensibility I've stepped on. I dare not take for granted that we are all on the same wavelength. Behind my back, I'm already labeled that feminist, troublemaker, the gender police, or its French equivalent, a gender gendarmerie. Hiya, we are mainstreaming. I think this is a beautiful passage of this poem. And I want to read another one. Oh, this is very important. Yeah, I want to read this part. It's a little long, so I'm not gonna read all of it. But at some point it says, the mainstreaming business is a conundrum. Integrating gender requires hard work. First, the documents arrive late with orders. Your deadline is now. Put gender in. Validate the gender paragraph. Mention the word women at least once. Mix and stir quick. Alimradi. Don't delay disbursement. Donors might be put off. Sukuma Twenda. First, you read the long document, hours on end, then you research, surf the net for country and sector-specific data. You exercise analytical skills to obliterate the stereotype, the myth, and the misconception. To coin a factual comment, phrase, with all evidence intact, at the end of all this, one sentence appears, and women will participate. But there is no mention of gender of the beneficiary. How can gender equality get traction? How can women get a fair deal? It's true. I think for those who are working in the development field, this is like really the summary of what has been going on, what is still going on. And let me ask you, what are the things you think we should look at to as a movement of feminists, which we don't we are not ashamed of calling ourselves feminists. So as a movement, what should we look at to bring about equality in the future, from now on, 2020 onwards?
Okay. I think we have, even if we have not have the achievements, there has been some achievements.
Okay.
I was participating in writing the Beijing Plus 25 for the NGO sector.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some achievements in education, in access to health facilities and services, in political participation, in women economic empowerment, in preventing gender-based violence, and so on. We have to admit that. But I think we also have to consider that this is a process issue. We have to keep sight of that. The patriarchal outlooks that we note took centuries to build. We should not expect to uproot this just like that. It will take a lot of unlearning on our part, because it's not fair to point a finger at men and say it is their fault, these men, these terrible men. There are patriarchal women, and mind you, women are the main bearers of patriarchy. We are the one who is that patriarch. We are the one who pass on patriarchal principles to our children in the way we bring them up.
Yeah.
You see? The change has to come to both of us, both women and men. And mind you, there are feminists among men as well. We can't say that willy-nilly that all men are patriarchal. No. We are beginning, we have seen some. We have seen my president, President Nyerere, who managed to put us Tanzanian women on the map when he allowed us to have equal opportunity in education.
Yeah.
There were several laws enacted at that time and forward, which have allowed women unprecedented opportunities in my own country.
Yeah.
So we have to know that we have to engage with men, and we both also have to transform our mindsets to bring up our children so that they do not become problems of our grandchildren in the future. That is one.
Yeah.
Secondly, we have to document our experiences, because what is happening right now is different from what will happen in 50 years' time. We have to put on the challenges that we face and how we have overcome them and how we have moved forward. Thirdly, we have to collaborate among ourselves, because sometimes there is a tendency, which has been noted not only by me, but even in other contexts, that women can undermine other women.
Yeah.
The struggle has to be one. We can't have these people talking this way and another group talking that way. We have to find what is common among us as women.
Yeah.
Just stick to that. Because whatever our differences might be, the mechanics of oppression are still the same. Not maybe to the same degree, but oppression exists even among the richest, even among the most blessed.
Of course.
We have also to remember that fighting for gender equality is like fighting for a liberation war. It is tough. Be a gender specialist, a gender activist, a defender of women's rights. We have to learn to be patient and tolerant, and we have to persist. We shouldn't just throw in the towel, all those women, all those, no. We have to keep at it, because by doing so, we keep chipping away a little by little on the patriarchal block. I'm quite sure even countries like Sweden, countries like Norway, the whole of Nordic countries, they started from a very lower place until they convinced, the whole society was convinced about the importance to development when things are equal. That's when you have pro-equality marital leave, maternity leave, where a woman goes for 3 months, a man goes for 3 months. Then they have 3 months to decide who is best suited to continue with the work. That is the world we should aspire to. We shouldn't give up.
True. Wow, this is very, very inspiring. It's very inspiring, because I think what you say is very true. We are actually speaking with women all around the world, and I can say for sure, according to my experience in Italy, there is a lot of gender-based violence. A lot of women have been killed in the last 2 months because they've been in lockdown. Patriarchy is very, very strong, because all our system is based on patriarchy. And as much as you can think it's a developed country, it's a European country, culturally, we are still very, very much behind. Very much behind. And as you were saying also, which I find very, very important, is that patriarchy is not only about men. Women are really holding that oppression onto other women. They are perpetrating that. And the reason why is because they are in that system, and they want that system to be continued and to be imposed on everyone else, So I think like the theme of sisterhood, or the theme of like coming together as a movement among women, it's very, very important also to challenge, unity. Because of course, when you are isolated, you are alone, and you fear the backlash of your activism, and they will shut you up. So how did you manage personally to continue for all these years without letting nobody shut you up? This maybe could be a suggestion for the activists who are following, for the women who are following.
Okay. As I told you, I started from a very young age questioning the inequality between women and men. And this has carried me throughout my life. And then because I read a lot of books about inequality, mind you, my degree in political science equipped me with concepts of freedom, equality, self-actualization, self-assertiveness, self-determination. And I know these are the principles that liberation fighters used, and they kept focused on these principles to save their countries from colonization. And I knew that these principles could also uphold my spirit as I continue this small contribution in chipping away on factors that result in women's oppression and marginalization. I have seen that probably change that I wanted to see might not happen during my lifetime, but I'm happy that we have planted the seed. We have given women hope. We have inspired others. We have challenged ourselves, and we keep moving on, notwithstanding the challenges, the insults. We take it in our stride. We remain focused. We know what we are fighting for, and we know why we are fighting. A more balanced world, a more equal world, a more happier world.
Yeah.
That is the goal. That is the goal.
Makes sense. What are your as you said that you were inspired also by other activists, I guess the people who liberated Africa, the continent. I don't know if the likes of Wangari Maathai also, or other women who have who were your inspirations? Who were the people you were looking up to?
Absolutely, there are many people. Let me start with the African ones. Obviously, Wangari Maathai and what she had to put up with in Kenya. Obviously, Winnie Mandela. Obviously, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And then the other examples, such as Margaret Thatcher. I would like to be the Iron Lady. I see people like Bandara Naike much even earlier on, and Mrs. Gandhi. These are the women whom I aspire to emulate. And even before I go that far, my own mother, who was a bastion of strength for all of us, because growing up for her in the 30s and early 40s, where the instruments of oppression were even worse, because these are the women who did not go that to school much, but who were subject to their husbands' whims and caprices. I admire, there are so many women that I admire, but there are also equally men who could challenge patriarchy, even in the 50s, like my former president, Mwalimu Nyerere. Men like Bourguiba of Tunisia, challenging patriarchy in an Arab world. Oh, there are so many. I can't recall all of them right now.
At present, at present, in the moment, who are you seeing in these times? Do you see anybody who is should be?
Yeah. Who inspires me at this time?
Yeah.
Not immediately, no.
Yeah.
But I forgot to mention Rosa Parker, the one who removed her seat to a white person and brought about a sea of change in race relations in America.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how even up today when we talk about feminism, we look at Angela Davis, we look at we don't have really like strong leaders right now in the international forum. If you look at that, we don't have strong women like voicing out the feminist agenda, like in the 70s, for example, in the United States, or even in Italy. In Italy, we had scholars who were really inspiring the feminist cause. And right now, I think we kind of went back a little. Even in Europe, I think there was a kind of regression. It's probably also because of the economic crisis, but I think we are really lacking this kind of leadership.
Normally, it's not only on the part of women.
Yeah.
I think globally, including even on the parts of men, we don't have in Africa, we don't have the likes of Nyerere or Kwame Nkrumah or even Mandela. I can't say it is because of complacency. In some contexts, that great leadership has been overtaken by other types of people whose priorities maybe are different. And this tends to influence even the attitudes, the energies of people who might want to do something outstanding. I agree with you. We don't have those type of models anymore. We don't.
Yeah. I think when we are always speaking out, we are always referring to the great women and men who spearheaded the feminist agenda, not only that, the liberation and the equality in the world, which we seem to live in a strange status quo that is gray. It's not black. It's like in there, but it doesn't really it doesn't really let change happen. We are still holding on.
I agree with you. That is not something that I have recently thought about, but come to think of it, I think we are lacking, but we have to keep talking about this, and we have to rejuvenate and resuscitate ourselves for another phase of people like those. And in this, I'm looking to you, the younger generation, because as you read books such as this one, and the other ones that have been written on the experiences of older women, I think you can begin to pick up and see how we could regain this momentum which was generated by our predecessors.
True. I think this is really important. So we really encourage also women who are following us and women who want to be part of the movement to read also inspiring stories, because this is what gives you also the strength to do it. If someone did it, then you can also do it. You look up at someone who actually managed to do it. So any other thing you want to add? Any other thing you want to say to the younger generation? And to we have an international audience. So our audience is not Europe or US. It's online. So we are really having an audience from South America, from Pakistan. So if you want to leave any message to women, and then we close up the interview.
Okay. I can only repeat two things that I have said before. Gender equality is a tough nut to crack. It is a tough world to live in. And I remember talking to my daughter one evening before, and she said, "Mommy, I cannot go through what you went through." And I told her, "I expect you to take my mantle." Through that book, what I tell the younger generation is that this is the baton which I'm passing on to you. This is what happened to the women of my generation. In a way, we have made it easier for you to be where you are today. Take certain things for granted, but within a limit, because the change is not that high yet. You people have to continue with the struggle, knowing how we struggled before you. And mind you, you have to pay attention that you don't want your daughters and grandchildren to have to regress and be in a situation that we were in. That is my first message. My second message is, in Africa, we have this tradition of passing things by way of mouth. It is good. But in addition, you've got to write down the experiences. There has to be a record of what has transpired, so that then you can learn from the mistakes that we have made and don't repeat them, and use this as a springboard to launch yourself into the next phase. So these are the two main messages that I have.
Wow, this is beautiful. Thank you very much. I will take it seriously. I will also write down my experiences. And I have many. So, and I think it's really important to write down the experiences that when you experienced patriarchy, when you experience oppression, it's important to have a record. Maybe you might not be able to voice it out now, but you have a record. And this is so important. Thank you very much, Laeticia. To our followers, so this is the title of the book. We really encourage you to read this book and to continue the struggle. Thank you so much, Laeticia. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
I'm honored. I'm really honored, and I'm humbled that we had this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So for our followers, tomorrow at 6 p.m. we have another guest. Shift Balance is a talk show that has a talk show that goes on every day at 6 p.m. Central European Time, and we are going to live stream the stories of 100 inspiring women around the world. So don't miss it. Let's keep in touch, and let's meet again. Thank you so much.